Relations. It is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's webinar, Pandemic Fatigue Redefined. As you know, we are committed to keeping our alumni and friends engaged with St. Anselm. By partnering with our centers, institutes, other departments on campus, and our alumni, we will continue to offer webinars, podcasts, and other opportunities to stay connected. I am so impressed with the variety of programs offered these last 10 months, and it is thanks to many people who have offered their expertise or suggested a topic. I would encourage you to contact the Alumni Relations Office if you have suggestions for future programs. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the college's website for those who couldn't make it live today. Our panel will speak for about 25 minutes or so, and then we'll take questions. There's a Q&A button on your screen. Please feel free to submit questions. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator. Dr. Paul Finn is a licensed psychologist in New Hampshire with specific expertise in health psychology, neuropsychology, and general clinical practice. In addition, he is subspecialty in sports psychology and has coached Division II sports, as well as taught and developed research in this area. Dr. Finn currently serves as faculty advisor for the Psi Chi Honor Society in Psychology, serves as director of the Sports Studies minor, and is once again chair of psychology. Now, Dr. Finn, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And I got to tell you, I've gotten smart enough over the past year on Zoom to be able to see who the attendees are. And I have two immediate feelings. One feeling is that I'd like to call this and let's all go out and get a glass of wine or such. The other feeling is I'm feeling rather intimidated right now. So I suggest to my fellow presenters, don't look at the attendee list. They're really cool people. You'll know most of them, but just stay away from that list. Listen, guys. This all started back with an Ashley St. A's alum named Hopkins now. Shaq had sent in a note that she had had her own journey with anxiety and had been through struggles of anxiety. And part of that, she developed a journal that she's using and wanted to be able to share. And I thought when the office contacted me that it'd be great to bring in some of our alum and be able to do it in a really broad sense and integrate it. Unfortunately, Ashley can't be here tonight, but she is certainly looking forward to talking in the future. She's already been invited to my humanistic psychology class. And I thank Ashley for motivating this get together of folks. We have so many alum out there now in the community who are doing incredible things in the human service area. And I take my hat off to you guys. So many have been working tirelessly during this whole pandemic to care for other people. And that is fascinating. I'm grateful to the folks. Folks I invited have a couple, had two interests. One, I wanted to get a couple folks who had boots on the ground, dealing with folks with anxiety, depression, etc. And the other one to span a couple of years to get a couple of folks who haven't been out as long to folks who can remember when they broke ground for the development of St. Anselm College. So that would be me. And I think we've pretty much got that range nicely covered. The beauty of the folks here is I will let them self-introduce. They're all licensed professionals and they're all actively engaged in the community. And we started off with the idea of anxiety, and I thought we'd change it to the notion title of pandemic fatigue, because it really isn't fatigue. It's anxiety, it's depression, it's trauma, and we are in trauma situation. And I will tell you, I've worked with many soldiers back in Vietnam, where they would come home and they could function there. But when it was over, they'd be walking down the street and they'd be afraid of a car bomb. So many little things, and it doesn't have to be really dramatic, but there's going to be an adjustment coming down the road. I did a webinar early on as we came into it, talking about surviving the pandemic. At some point, we're going to look forward. I want my colleagues to be able to speak to their experiences and what they're doing now. And then I'm going to bring it back later for a few minutes, and then we're going to have an open discussion. So with that amount of yakking, I'm going to ask Stephanie if she could step up, please.
Great, thanks, Coach. I think that was a great intro to the topic, and I'm also feeling a bit intimidated by the attendee list, so please forgive me if I sound a little bit robotic here. But so I'm Stephanie Dahlberg. I graduated from St. A's in 2014. I'm an MSW, and I'm currently working in the field in New Hampshire. I have a focus on homelessness and working directly with people experiencing homelessness, and also doing some community organizing type of work. So that's a little bit about me and my background. And then are we diving straight into the topics, or do we want to introduce each person? Sorry, Coach.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. All right, great. I will continue running with this. So a couple things that came to mind when we were discussing this topic were self-care and hope. Those were the couple of things that I'd like to focus on here. So, during this time with the pandemic, I think all of us have had to face and learn more about anxiety and depression, and think a little bit more about self-care. In the social work field, we all kind of tend to roll our eyes when the topic of self-care comes up, like, oh, yeah, self-care, got it, we'll do it at some point. And it sounds for us a little something like, I'll get to that when I finish my 2,000 Zoom calls. I'll get to that when I finish my client notes. Can't forget those notes. I'll finish that when I, do all of my trainings and professional development. It's always kind of on the back burner. I need to take care of my family, finish the chores, run some errands. Yeah, okay. I am feeling a little irritable now. I'm losing some sleep, but I really got to keep going. I need to keep doing this. There's people who need my help. There's things that need to get done. But I'll get to self-care later. A lot of us are going at a fast pace, not just social workers, going a million miles an hour, and we don't really take the time for self-care and rest. Our society places such a high value on productivity and the ability to keep busy. It's pretty much the norm. It starts at a really young age. I'm sure that everyone here can relate to that. Taking time to rest, you're viewed kind of as a slacker, and then overworking gives you a badge of honor. Self-care might look like having the choice to take your 30-minute lunch at 12 or 1. But if you're really committed to your work, you get to eat lunch while you work, or maybe skip it altogether. We don't really take the time to take care of ourselves like we should. Our society has kind of forced us into believing our value is based on productivity and our worldly contributions. Some of this, I think, can be tied to technology and the fact that we're expected to be turned on and connected 24/7, available at the click of a button all the time. I'm sure I'm not the only one here who keeps my phone on all night and next to my bed where I can hear it. During these times, we've all had to shift what our normal day and routine looks like. Some things take longer than usual. I think we're still expected to be available at the click of a button at all day and all night. And a lot of us are experiencing some Zoom fatigue, so I appreciate you being on here tonight. But we are spending less time out running around and more time in isolation. Even for those of us who have increased demands at work and at home and we're not able to fill our extra time with gatherings and outings, and we're forced to rest in one way or another. I think I've seen a lot of people, myself included, feeling some tension. There's a discrepancy between what we've been taught about our self-worth and purpose and all the busyness, and our forced time to slow down and reflect. And this leaves a lot of people feeling uneasy, anxious, and depressed. Some examples might look like, who am I if I can't do X, Y, and Z? I've exhausted all the isolation activities by trying new hobbies and binge watching my favorite shows. What do I do now? Maybe my place of employment has closed down and I'm not sure who I am anymore. My loved one is sick and there's nothing I can do because we can't be together. And even in all of those examples, I think that kind of, we all have experienced those things. There's a lot that we can't do right now. An example that I explored with another group was when we talked about how it feels like we've all been on a treadmill for so long that now being forced to take a step off of the treadmill has our bodies confused and our legs still wanting to race. Not sure if anyone here has had that experience when you use a machine at the gym and you've been going on it, and then you step off and it kind of feels like the legs are still moving, but your body's not. It's a strange feeling, and I think it kind of relates to how we might be feeling now. While some are digging their heels in and trying to force a sense of normalcy by ignoring what's going on, I found the most inspiration in those who are able to stop, who reflect, appreciate, and focus on hope. Reflecting on where things are at with an open heart, letting the thoughts come and go without fighting them, being open to experiences we can't hide and have no control over, appreciating the day with all of its mess, allowing that ebb and flow to continue, holding on to hope by keeping your eyes forward and being present at the same time. It's a little bit of a difficult skill to practice. I think we all will continue practicing through our lives, but it definitely requires a sense of acceptance for the current state and situation, and appreciating the moment, but also having an awareness that the times will pass. Also, those who try to focus on their why and understand their worth is outside of what they do. I found that to be a huge help for the people that I work with on a daily basis. Our coping mechanisms and self-care that help us be present while looking ahead help us also focus on hope. And those things have also likely changed during these times. For me, I have two major forms of self-care that have seemed to be taken away during these times. I really need time with others to fill my cup. And during these times, I've really tried to fill those needs by scheduling video chat time and spending more time on social media, only to find I'm still feeling pretty isolated and some emptiness at times. And then I've always really needed running to help me process my thoughts and experience a more hope-filled day. I haven't had time to run as much as I would like because I'm working full-time at home and also being a full-time mom and wife all at once with no breaks and added responsibilities. Needless to say, it's been really busy. I've tried running during my lunch break, waking up early to get a run in, trying to squeeze in a run wherever I can because I know that it really helps my mental state. And those things have been great when I'm able to fill it in and it doesn't feel like an added burden. But there's days when I'm not able to run at all and I have to kind of accept a state of rest without movement and discover some new ways to cope with what I'm going through. I've been able to take some needed time to reflect on my life and where things are at. And I realized rest was really a huge thing I was missing in my self-care. With more rest, I'm able to better accomplish what I need to get done. And yes, I don't get to accomplish as much, and I might not, check all those boxes that those around me might want me to check off, but I've really taken some time to realize that my worth is outside of what I do, and I'm having more peace and less anxiety by practicing that. We really are made for more than what we do, and our value goes deep, deep into who we are. I personally turn to my faith to help me figure that out, and it might be something else for you. I encourage everyone listening to this to take some time for rest and reflect on what makes you, you without everything that you do. There's a season for everything, and rest and self-care definitely shifts with time, the things that you need to do for those. So if you're not already, you might want to try practicing some new forms of self-care this week. Are there things that you're not already doing that can bring you a sense of peace and joy? Are there positive things around you that help inspire hope? And I think that is really what I wanted to share tonight and some of the things I've learned about managing some anxiety during these times. Thanks. I will turn it back over to Coach Finn.
Thank you. Thank you. We could spend the rest of this process just looking, and I'm trusting folks can hear me with this, but just talking about what you were saying here now, and moving on quickly through each one can be a little bit frustrating because I'd love to spend more time. Let's move over now to Bianca. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Coach, and thanks, Stephanie. That was beautifully stated. I'm kind of going to go off a lot of what you said about the importance of self-care and developing strategies to prevent crisis. My name is Bianca Ciuffredo. I graduated in 2012, and I have been working for the same community mental health agency for 10 years, which feels like a long time. I worked in the residential department while I was getting my master's degree, and then I was also an intern there, and I'm finally settled into a position as an emergency services clinician. So I work in 2 emergency rooms, and I evaluate clients who come to the emergency department with psychiatric crises. So I'm going to be speaking a lot to managing crisis, managing compound traumatic stress, and how this pandemic is impacting all of that for a lot of people. We've been seeing a lot of clients lately. The volume's been really high. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how we can identify early warning signs for ourselves before it escalates into a crisis. Not that I wouldn't like to see you all in the emergency room, but I don't want to see you all in a crisis. So, you know, I feel like it's really hard for people to truly understand how COVID-19 is impacting our internal state. The word crisis is interpreted in a lot of different ways for different people. And then when you add this layer of the global pandemic, we're starting to look at compounding traumatic stress. And it's not just for our patients, it's also for providers. I know for me, I've been in an emergency room all throughout this pandemic, and back when we didn't have enough N95 masks and we didn't have enough PPE, I was definitely in a state of intense hypervigilance. And I think to a degree, we've all experienced some level of depression, anxiety, sleep disturbance, appetite issues, lack of motivation. I mean, you see all these people, which I think is great, people developing all of these little gardens and learning how to cook sourdough bread and, all these cool things that people are learning how to do. But then there are the rest of us who might feel like, oh my God, like I can't even brush my teeth. Like, what is wrong with me? I think social media has a lot to do with that. But when you add all this together, a lot of people I see are experiencing suicidal thoughts for the first time. And so I'm very proud to work for an agency that takes initiative in terms of talking about suicidal thoughts, normalizing that conversation, and managing those types of things before it escalates into a full-blown psychiatric crisis or a suicide attempt. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of patients post-suicide attempt, so after they've attempted and been treated and need to get some help for that. So a phrase I use with a lot of my clients, and actually something I learned from Coach Finn's humanistic psychology class, is from Viktor Frankl. And it's that an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is a normal response. And so right now we are all in the midst of the most abnormal time in any of our lives, most likely. We're all acting a little bit abnormally. And what I want you to hear is that right now that is normal. Right now that is the human experience. And part of my job is to validate that and to help everyone to understand that we are all feeling this together. And sometimes just hearing from one of my coworkers, like, oh, that shift in the emergency room was chaos. I'm exhausted. I really need a day off. I saw a COVID positive patient who also had a psychiatric issue. I'm just wiped. And there's a little bit about that that makes me feel better, because I'm like, I know exactly how that feels, and I feel the same way. And it's very validating to hear them say the same thing. And so in this field in particular, especially those like Stephanie with our boots on the ground and out there meeting with patients and clients, and in these times, it's good to talk to each other through Zoom or whatever means we can, to know that we're all sharing these experiences. And, in college, when I ran cross country, I would find a lot of solace in my teammates. We were running these 1,000-meter repeats and these hill workouts, and we were in pain during those workouts. Thank you, coach, for that. And we would be there with each other through the pain, and we would help each other get up that hill. And so what I tell a lot of my clients is to prevent yourself from getting to a state where you get into a full-blown crisis. It's important to find your people, find your supports, however you need to communicate with them. I haven't hugged my dad since March because I am too high of a risk for him right now. But I still talk to him on the phone. I taught him how to video chat, and it's the most hilarious thing because like I see his nose hairs and I barely see his face when he's trying to talk to me through the Zoom chat. But it's still a way to stay in touch. And if we had more time, I would talk about psychological first aid and skills for psychological recovery. I use a lot of those strategies in the emergency room, and they're very accessible. They're not just for mental health professionals. Anyone can learn them and use them. And if anyone's interested, I can link them in the chat for you to just do some research on and kind of print out as a cheat sheet for yourselves. But my takeaway message for everybody is to recognize your early warning signs. So recognize when you start sleeping less, even if it's just an hour less. Recognize when you don't feel as hungry. Recognize when you feel like you can't even motivate yourself to brush your teeth, that kind of thing. And when you identify those, reach out to your people and talk to them and say, hey, like, let's set an alarm together every day and do 10 push-ups. And setting those tiny, small goals right now to get ourselves through each day is the best we can do. I think it's a huge success these days, just brushing my hair or just, doing something like cooking a different type of meal. Things that take no energy during normal times take a ton of energy right now. So just be nice to yourselves, ask for support, and, it's okay to ask for help. That's what we're here for. And with that said, I will turn it back to Coach, and thank you all for coming.
Dee, thank you very much. And I see there's a Q&A popping up, and what I'm going to do is integrate them at the end of it. We've got such precious little time. I'm going to be moving on to the lady who's probably had 5 years of graduate school and has been married for 5 days. So Kelly, take it away.
Am I good?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm still looking at you, Coach. Sorry. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Coach. My name is Dr. Kelly Rudolph. I graduated from St. A's in 2011, and I just recently graduated with my PhD from East Carolina University in 2020 in July. So my degree is actually in clinical health psychology. So just like Coach Finn, I specialize in health psych. I am doing my postdoc right now in hematology oncology in Charlotte, North Carolina at Atrium Health. So I work with patients and families of all ages, races, backgrounds, social economic status. I work with a lot of different people from different walks of life. And so I love everything that Stephanie and Bianca have mentioned already and completely agree with everything they have said. And just to kind of build off of them, I think that it is totally normal to have higher anxiety and depression at this time. And COVID anxiety especially is something that I am constantly talking about with my patients, especially when you work with people who are immunocompromised. COVID's a pretty scary and unknown thing. So it's definitely something that comes up a lot with both healthy and not so healthy people. And what I talk to my patients about is really focusing on things you can control in your life. versus things you can't control. Because I think that a lot of people, especially with high anxiety, really focus on those things that they can't control. And they spend a lot of time and energy worrying about these things that they can't control. So that's a conversation that we have a lot, especially in kind of the oncology world too. There's a lot of things that are just really unfair, and that are really just out of your control. So I think that goes along with kind of COVID too, is that, we can do what we can to keep ourselves safe. We can, wear our masks, wash our hands, and social distance. And that's, those are things that are in our control. What we don't have control over is, the people who don't want to wear masks, or, people who are not really following rules. And that can be really stressful when you're really focused on those things going on. So another thing that I wanted to briefly talk about was the practice of gratitude. And that's something, again, that I work with my patients a lot with. And so there's some really, really cool research behind it that I'll talk about in a second. But gratitude is a very intentional practice of focusing on things that you're grateful for in your life. And this does not mean that we are discounting, the crappy things that are going on, like the pandemic or having to reschedule your wedding, for example. But things like little things that are happening in our day-to-day life. And so I myself practice this too. So I don't, tell my patients to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And something as little as just, reviewing your day and saying, what are 3 things that I'm grateful for today? And just writing those down can really improve your mood, especially when you feel like everything is kind of going not the best, especially given, our political climate here and just what's happening with COVID. There's certainly a lot of things to feel sad about and to not feel hopeful about. But when we stop and really are intentional about focusing on these small things, it could be something as small as I got to go for a 5-minute walk outside, or I had a really good cup of coffee this morning, or someone held the door for me when I was walking into the grocery store today. These are super small things that maybe you wouldn't really pay attention to if you weren't looking for them in your life. And so again, there's a lot of really cool research that says that, doing this for a couple weeks, just reviewing 3 things that you're grateful for every day, can improve your mood in the long term. So even if you stop doing it after a week or so, your mood still might be a little bit better a month later. So it kind of helps you to refocus and to look for things throughout your day that are positive things and good things and things that you're grateful for that you might not have even thought twice about. So I feel like when I'm actively practicing gratitude, I look for things throughout my day that I want to write down later, and I'm really sit and appreciate them, and it's more intentional. So that's something that I kind of challenge a lot of people to do, and that could totally look different from person to person. So I also work with a lot of kids, and we sometimes do things like a gratitude tree, make it into an art project, or make a cool looking jar and we put in things that we're grateful for, and they incorporate their family members, or it's something that they do with other people. So there are many, many ways to do this. I also, every evening when I sit down with my husband, Mike, for dinner, we ask each other, what was good about today? Instead of asking, how was your day? And just saying good and moving on with that. We ask each other, what is good about your day? And that's kind of our gratitude practice that we share together. So that's something that I certainly encourage everyone to just give it a little try. It certainly can't hurt. And again, we're not discounting any of the difficult things that are going on at all. And this is definitely not toxic positivity by any means. I know it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's just kind of looking for a little bit of good in a world that seems not the best right now. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Coach.
Thank you very much. And I certainly do remember at freshman orientation when you said, I'm going to be a clinical psychologist. And you said it with willfulness and quite determined. Congratulations on pursuing that. That's just absolutely fantastic. Now, I got to tell you, Assumption is an absolutely great college. One of the reasons Assumption is great is they have the awareness and sensitivity to hire St. Anselm College graduates. And Adam is a professor at Assumption College. You really got to give them a lot of credit for their good choice and wisdom in doing that. And saying that, Adam, it's yours.
All right. Thanks, Paul. And thanks, Kelly, Bianca, and Stephanie. And I have to agree with Paul there. They definitely made a great choice in hiring me. Hopefully I'll still be around. So I graduated from St. A's in 2001, which I guess that's a super long time ago, but not quite. Paul kind of jokes I'm sort of old, but not quite. I'm a counseling psychologist and licensed mental health counselor. And as Paul said, I'm a professor at Assumption University. I largely teach in our clinical counseling psychology program, where we train master's level students to become licensed counselors. And we do take pride in our program, which will be a theme here in a moment, where we're a cognitive behavioral therapy program. We're evidence-based practice. And believe it or not, you don't see as many of those, in my opinion, as you should at the master's level. So Kelly, Bianca, Stephanie, I was taking notes as you're going because I had a list of fun little techniques and you guys covered a lot of things. So I got nothing. No, I'm just kidding. So I got plenty of other stuff here that I want to highlight here is one of them that I think all three of us or four of us have alluded to a little bit is self-compassion. So I was making some notes, doing my little thing as a professor. I look at the literature. That's how we work. But I also think back to working with my clients when I talk to my graduate students. And to be blunt, I think we need to do a better job of giving ourselves and others a break. Again, some of these things that I'm going to be talking about here would apply to life pre-COVID, post-COVID, but some of these really get a strong asterisk when we're talking about the present. I find trying to be more flexible, knowing when to let it go. Thanks to my 4-year-old son, I can't say that expression without thinking about Frozen and singing that song in my head. But if that helps, remind yourself that. And speaking of, it was mentioned earlier, humanistic techniques, even as a CBT therapist, we really emphasize to our students the importance of a lot of Rogerian skills. And a big one too, that I think we kind of neglect with ourselves is validating our own feelings and also the feelings of others. I think that's really important to not forget that, you know, in terms of relating it to myself, I tend to be very hard on myself if I'm not as productive as I want to be. And one of my other comments I have here, which kind of overlaps, is acceptance. So I try to give myself a break, acknowledge how I feel, how it affects my mood and my behaviors. I also try to work on being more patient with my wife and son. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves that, you know, it just sounds obvious when you say it verbally, but cognitively, that it's not just affecting us, it's affecting others in different ways. Even my little kiddo, who's 4 years old, which I'm grateful is able to attend preschool now, it was really tough those first few months where everything was shut down and he didn't have any social interaction with the little guys. And he's a very social boy and it was very hard for him. So I have to kind of remind myself too, you know, as a parent and as a caretaker of an older father that, you know, it affects us in different ways. And sometimes we kind of focus more on how it just affects us. And related to acceptance, which is another piece I want to talk about, is adjusting our expectations. We don't all necessarily have to thrive the same way that we did before COVID. Again, for me, that was a big piece to really accept and work on. I noticed that my productivity in writing and research had gone down. As it was mentioned earlier, I forget who it was, not a big fan of Zoom. I'm not either. But I had to accept that that's still better than nothing, and you get used to it. And it's okay if I don't reach all my writing goals or something to that effect, or it's okay if I need more time to grade. Also, not set myself up and put too many things on my to-do list, you know, to kind of just accept the situation to some degree. And I won't make any comments about focus on what you can control, because Kelly did an excellent job covering that as well. But just to kind of be aware of our situation and what we can and can't control, and accept to some degree what's out there. One thing that's kind of like my own little doohickey thing that I've been doing for many years now, and I'll sound a little dorky on this, is I call it mindfully reflect daily. This isn't like pure mindfulness. That's a topic for, it's a great way of approaching therapy as a specific factor, but this is more just generally speaking. I feel like, especially in our culture, society, things can get really blurred. Each day goes by. I think we can all go by, it comes Friday and you go, what did I do this week? right? Or what were my experiences? Kind of like all blur, at least for me, maybe it's just me. My mind gets foggy when I get busy and stressed out, and it gets even more foggy when it comes to with all the COVID stressors. So I think it's helpful for us to kind of, again, and this sounds a little cliche like, but focus more on the outcomes than the journey, the process. The part that's a little dorky is I keep a personal daily log. It's a little Excel spreadsheet. I've been doing this for many years. I like to kind of keep on top of certain things, but I made some certain modifications for the pandemic. So for me, especially, my sleep hygiene has gotten kind of crummy. So I kind of keep track of when I fall asleep, when I wake up. I spend like maybe 5-7 minutes at the end of each day and kind of reflect upon what did I do, even if it was I worked, spent time with my son, visited my dad. I even have things where I track my mood a little bit. I have little notes to maybe monitor my irritability, and myself too. I'm trying to watch my diet. COVID has not helped at all. So I even keep tabs on myself. Did I have a night snack? Did I meditate, or did I give myself 30 minutes to read? So if anyone's interested, I can give you templates of things like this too. I got a lot of interesting, fun handouts. Let's see, I'm not sure. I'm probably almost up for time because we got a little bit. I was going to have one more piece, I guess I'll say, and Paul, you can do that thing to let me know if I'm running out of time soon. This was mentioned earlier, and I apologize. I don't know if it was Kelly or Bianca or Stephanie talking about the media. And I've been looking, there's a lot of good tips on what's called an information diet. So I need to both manage my food intake, but also the amount of media. And I'll be blunt, for about 4 years, I've changed my media watching strategies, but I won't say why, but you can probably get a hint at that. But there's been a lot of people where we found that research too is supporting this, that watching, listening, reading too much news basically can make a lot of us miserable. And it can really exacerbate what we call catastrophizing, which is when we assume the worst case scenario and attach a high probability of that happening. And so some of the literature I've been reading is pretty much saying that no more than 1 hour a day, some recommend 30 minutes, and to really avoid the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or any of that stuff that I don't no longer know anymore or care about. I don't have any of that stuff, by the way. The greatest decision I ever made in my life, like 12 years ago, by the way, is to get rid of all of that and just have LinkedIn. Little side note. Good. And all the thing too is, if you can, look for the facts of things, like for COVID. And I realize this affects all of us, but I talked to my dad about this. He was very anxious about this. He's 77 years old. The majority of people do experience relatively mild symptoms, right? And the fatality rate is only about 2 to 3%. Now, I realize that's still high, don't get me wrong. But sometimes when we watch the media a lot, it feels like, you get it and it's an automatic death sentence and it's going to be a horrible experience. And so a lot of times people can get very anxious hearing those things. So just, for me personally, I tend to notice when I watch the media, I do tend to get pretty emotionally aroused when I get upset. Yesterday was very difficult to peel myself away from the television for good reason. That was a historical moment for unfortunate reasons. So my wife jokes that she hardly ever hears me yell except for 2 things. When I watch the news, I yell at the TV and tell people how dumb they are. And when I watch sports, because clearly I should be the coach or the ref because I know the best. So I find for me, when I want my media dose, is I minimize watching TV live, although yesterday I couldn't, and I just try to read it. My point is we all have different strategies. I'm not saying disconnect yourself completely from the world, but sometimes it's best to kind of minimize your exposure, and maybe find alternative approaches to media that are a little bit more positive or realistic, that provide a bigger picture. So I think my time's up, so I will stop here.
Okay, thank you very much. And we've got a lot of great ideas coming through, and in Q&As, people are asking both for Adam and for Bianca's templates. And it's fine if I do the talking and we stay focused on Adam. That's perfectly okay with me. I've often wondered if when you're in class, Adam, if you had visions of a bed behind you that you could take a nap, but that's probably not so much true. But let me go ahead and throw my 2 cents with this. Look, when we're under threat, we get into the fight, flight, and fright response. But what that means is if you can't run away, you're going to get stressed. When you're going to get stressed, you're going to release hormones in the body like cortisol, and cortisol is going to help you spare your weight. We gain weight when we're stressed. And it's not just our food preferences, which is a part of it. And there's so much that goes on to it, but there's something else we generally don't talk about. We learned about fight, flight, fright, but we don't talk much about flock. We don't have big claws to go after folks, all right? We don't rip with our teeth. We flock together. And what we are told is that if you flock with each other, you will probably die. Okay, so one of our major coping resources just isn't there. Are we focused on Adam still? Thanks, Bianca. I miss flocking. And I gotta tell you, to be around my friends is really huge. But if you're around them, you risk dying. So here we got the paradox. This is how we manage stress. We can't do, so we're going to flock. But if you go in the supermarket and you look at someone, they're potentially a killer. So we don't make eye contact anymore. We turn our head from people. We monitor the 6 feet. And I found myself getting mad because some dude was walking the wrong way down the shopping aisle with no mask. And I thought, oh my God, Paul, what's going on with you? I know. The anger is in me. The anger is in my heart. And we're going to come out of this COVID. You know what's going to happen when we come out of COVID? I'm going to tell you, because this is really, really scary. This is what's going to happen. Okay? We're going to want to hug. When I saw that on the internet, that scared me. That's a hugging Cookie Monster, but that's like death behind me. Stay away. So this isn't going to be all ollie in free and all clean. And it's not, we're going to say, oh yeah, I'm cool, I'm fine. Hey, I can handle everything. It's just going to be a subtle thing in the background, like the Vietnam vet who came home and was very fearful walking by cars because they could explode, knowing logically they're not going to explode. Let me tell you, and this I think is incredibly important. 6 feet. If you're going to express intimacy, you do it within 6 feet. You nurture your elderly person, the hand on the forehead. How are you? Can I care for you? Within 6 feet. You hold your baby within 6 feet. You hug someone you love within 6 feet. Intimacy is within 6 feet. If you go give someone a finger, get out of 6 feet. You do that from a distance. You're going to express your anger from a distance. And we're practiced with that. Hell, the last pandemic, coming out the end of it from a political science colleague told me that was the development of the Hitler Youth movement in the United States. We're angry. I saw it yesterday, Adam. I was watching the same thing on television. I started getting really angry inside. And it took a lot for me to stop and say, okay, wow. And I went back, and I'm an evidence-based person as well, but I went way back in time to Carl Rogers, with the unconditional positive regard for people that says you care for that person, but you hold them accountable to their behavior. And then I realized he stole it from Christ. Hate the sin, but love the sinner. So what did the people do? Did they violate the law? Is there a felony? Hold them accountable to the felony and care for the person. That's a hard thing to do today because I'm pandemic tired, right? And it's been a long journey. And coming out of the journey isn't going to be just ollie in free. We're going to have to be aware of how we're coming out of it, how we're caring for each other, and what we're doing with that. So just a couple more quickies. Hate is in our heart and is easily done beyond 6 feet. Intimacy is often within 6 feet. It's not easy having students that are 2 inches square. Writing a recommendation for a 2-inch square person is also fun. But I'm calling it trauma because we'll see in hindsight, for many folks, it's clearly trauma, the loss of a loved one that they couldn't be there for. So many things. So I'll go down that road. Let's take a look on the positive side of it. Back, Bianca, and thanks for that reference. You go back to Viktor Frankl, who suffered, a Holocaust survivor, lost his whole family. And part of the reason he made it out was that self-statement of when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Now that's easy to say and incredibly hard to do. So let me suggest that I am well practiced at having spontaneous anger inside of me and feeling hate, but then having to think through it, to reconceptualize it in a positive way. I never used to have to do that, but and to hug someone is going to take, it's going to take a little bit of work once that's available. So let me go back with one quick point, and we're going to throw it more open. Let's go back to the word love. It's not a noun, it's a verb. It takes practice. And to love people takes practice. It's an art. And we are out of practice with the art because we've been isolated. Now, listening to you guys, you're indeed loving every day, but not fully for yourself. You're giving for others. And so that compassion fatigue becomes huge. And Kelly, sitting with your husband at night and talking about the day, Bianca getting out on those morning runs, and I love the Facebook pictures. Stephanie being married to a St. Anselm graduate is awesome. Having a baby, you're seeing how these things are emerging, and they're incredibly important. But bringing that together, there's a lot of things that come about. Bianca, that team business of what we used to say, running together, we still do it ourselves. We're alone, we got to push that hill. But alone, we run together. When I'm off running, when I did that today, jogging, I'm slow, in the woods, I think about folks. And in the woods, I'm alone, but we're together. And that's an important state. Kelly, gratitude. Can we do a 3-hour talk on that? I know we won't cover it all there. I love the term toxic positivity. I'm careful for that line of being called toxic positive, but somehow we study all the empirical data, but we bring it to our practices in a positive style. Self-care, Steph. Wish we had time to talk about hope, self-compassion, Adam. Can you see the themes coming together, guys? We're really similar. All right, let me slow down a little bit and ask Steph, any spontaneous thoughts about hope?
It's not easy right now. That's one of my spontaneous thoughts about that. Hope has been harder, especially working with those experiencing homelessness and the housing situation out there being so difficult. It has been hard, but not impossible. Yeah, hope is hard to find right now, but I think really trying to take some time to breathe, and kind of what I mentioned earlier, knowing that things are in constant motion and changing, and it won't be this way forever. Just doing what we can.
That's really important. And Kelly, can you have gratitude without hope?
I think that'd be really difficult. I think maybe expressing gratitude and practicing it, like I said, being really intentional about your gratitude practice, I think is certainly a way to increase hope, especially if you're kind of on the lower side of the hopelessness scale. Then I think, really paying attention to the little things can certainly increase hope, even a little bit, which I think is important right now.
Thank you. And for any of you guys, one of the attendees is talking about anger, and that's feeling of anger toward anti-maskers, bar hoppers, etc. Any thoughts on, clearly we want people to be safe. And look, I had the vaccine yesterday, but nothing changes in my life. My wife hasn't had a vaccine. People I love haven't had the vaccine yet. Until we were all in free, I'm masking it up. What are your suggestions on dealing with the reality of that anger, though?
I can speak a little to this. And I talked a little bit about, controlling the controllable. It's not, up to you if other people wear masks. And I think that people are valid in being angry when they see people not following the rules. And I think, as I think Adam mentioned it a lot, having some acceptance of, feeling that anger and not fighting it and trying to change it and just kind of letting it be there can also be important, because those are real feelings and they matter. And they also, our emotions point us to things that are important to us. So it's important that, the people around us are safe and that other people are safe. But I think it's really, really frustrating right now. And like I said, I work with, compromised patients who, some of them, live in South Carolina and still go to school where kids don't wear masks. And that's a really big stress for a lot of people. And, you can wear your mask, you can wash your hands, you can social distance, but you can't make anyone else do that. So I think that just, again, focusing on, yourself, what you can do, what you can control is really important, but also having some acceptance that, you're mad and you're angry and it's unfair, because it is. So I think there's a lot of validity in those feelings, and having, like I said, some acceptance can be really important to kind of your mental health.
And it certainly goes with what Stephanie's talking about in terms of the self-care and struggling to get out for that run, because I know if I'm feeling angry and I get out and exercise, the anger diminishes. And if it doesn't diminish, then I better deal with it because it's important. One of the folks asked what other kind of techniques, mentioned Rogerian technique, but what other kind of techniques should we use? Certainly, I'll throw one in that, and looking to the future, is being aware that it's not going to be like yesterday things were taken away from us, okay? And it's not going to be given back to us as we go down the road. We are different now. And we need to work on our how we engage the art, not the noun, of loving and caring for ourselves and caring for each other. And that's still very broad, but it's a conversation to be had. My personal example is my wife and I have not been to Mass since March of last year. We've been going to St. A's every Sunday, and I can tell you all that's been going on there. But, the coffee and donut after Mass downstairs, or listening to somebody moan and groan about something going on at school, and the flocking that occurs, the church calls it a flock. The flocking that occurs, that's not there, and we're going to have to step back into that carefully. And the first time walking back into a church, someone coughs, we're all going to duck. Seriously. So let's just be aware and take our steps carefully into where we're going. Any other ideas, panelists? Now, for those watching, understand that we're all very well trained at managing silence, so don't feel anxious for us. And oh, by the way, I saw when I looked at the attendance that Jim Flanagan's online, so I know he can hear us. That as soon as it's safe, he's going to buy us all calzones in the coffee shop. And I'm sure I know him well enough to know that I can offer that on his behalf. Rebecca, class of 1995, proud to be a St. A's grad. Yes, indeed. Come back to the Hill once you can safely enter the campus. There's so much to show you. And I just can't wait to see folks again. Do you know that so many people love me and Jean that they haven't come to visit? You know, we were on a lake, it's beautiful. And people come by, they run the kayak, we have s'mores, we cook out, but no one wants to kill their old professor. So it's an act of love that I've seen nobody in so long. So in effect, what happens is we wind up camping and we see Kelly's oh yeah. One person who did come by to visit and stayed at a distance and so on just mentioned, does that mean I wanted to kill you, coach? I will say to Stacy that you killed me a long time ago when I was watching you and Corinne winning the Disney marathon. To quote you specifically, what the flip? And I think we got Bianca looking at the sheet. Who's here? I want to know what's going on. Okay. Yes, aqua jogging is socially distanced. Any final thoughts, guys, as we're at 6:57 and I want to be respectful of the hour and the fact that this is recorded for all posterity?
I mean, I won't take up to, Paul kind of already covered it. Very great concluding comments, Paul, there. But again, another kind of cliche, but this too will pass. And this has affected all of us permanently. One thing I didn't have a chance to chat about, and don't worry, I won't say anything here, but if you're interested in these topics, there's some really cool stuff on what's called post-traumatic growth. And that doesn't necessarily, you have PTSD, but we all have traumatic experiences in our lives, and research actually shows that a lot of times it's not the occasional big stressors, it's the accumulation of small stressors. So if you're interested in that, interest of time, take a look at that. There's some really cool ways, again, not that toxic positivity, to use that term earlier, but genuine positive adaptive ways that we can respond and survive from this particular event. Keeping that hope looking forward. Most of us will still be around, will be changed, but we can be changed for the better. And I had one little quote here, since we're doing comments about, as a cognitive behavioral therapist, a lot of it comes down to our thinking and how it affects our emotions and how we behave. And all my colleagues have heard this by Epictetus. People are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them. And another great one I love from him is freedom and happiness are won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And I think that type of thinking to some degree, along with acceptance, can really help us move forward and try to be hopeful working towards the future after this.
And we got a couple quick questions. One is, how do we practice forgiveness? I think looking into oneself, the hardest person to forgive is very often ourselves, and working on our own natural feelings of anger, frustration, and hurt. It doesn't mean forgive and forget, because if you just plain old forget, it means forgive and don't hold on. But if somebody punches me in the face, I can forgive, but I will duck next time. And that's not a great answer, but definitely self-acceptance and forgiveness becomes incredibly important first. Second, an anonymous attendee says, how can we help our teens manage the stress and anxiety of pandemic? Any advice, techniques you can have to help the loss of activities, graduations, proms, etc. Two quick points. One, we had these folks come to college. They missed it all in high school. They get to St. A's, and St. A's has them sign the agreement that they're not going to do X, Y, and Z. And here you are, that freshman in college, maybe you're on a team, you want to go off campus and be that person. And we're saying, sign an agreement, you got to stay, you got to hold strong. They did incredibly well. I got to tell you, we're very, very proud of the freshmen and also the community and how everything was set up. It's very difficult to do. However, the question specifically is, how can the parent manage, I'm guessing, the teenager's anxiety? And what I would suggest is that the college make available another webinar, because this is a huge topic and I wouldn't do it justice in the time we don't have remaining. but it's incredibly important. And there may actually be experience that can be related from getting your sons and daughters in as freshmen to college, and how that best, what worked best for their adjustment. I don't know how this can work, if I can keep the presenters on for a few minutes after we sign off, but folks, I really want to, I'm sorry, I'm distracted. Oh, as an alum and a Manchester resident, I'm so grateful for the students being so considerate and compassionate. Thank you. That message will get back to the students. We're very proud of them. Thank you all for attending this webinar, and to the panelists, I love you guys. Thank you.